What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, we're going to talk about what else can we talk about? The conflict that's going on in Gaza. So, as we know, on October 7th, 2023, the military wing of Hamas struck a surprise attack into Israel centered around the Reem Festival. This attack, casualties were beyond over 700 people. I have no hesitation in calling this Israel's 9/11 moment. It was a surprise attack, and Hamas came prepared, the whole nine. Machine gun paragliders, bulldozers, motorcycles. Not only was there the attack of assaults and murders, but there was also the kidnapping of over 200 Israelis and other foreign nationals, which Hamas has learned to use this tactic of kidnapping to use for leverage down the line to negotiate certain concessions from the other side. Since this occurred, and because of the scale of it, Israel, of course, wanted to create a deterrence, has insisted on turning Gaza, one of the most densely populated regions of the world. We're talking about a place of 2 million people, over 2 million people, with a population density on the scale of a major city such as New York. So pretty much anywhere and everywhere there are civilians, and because of the young demographic of Palestine or the Gaza Strip, it's going to be a lot of children as well. And Israel, determined, hell bent on turning Gaza into a parking lot, specifically North Gaza, as they were telling Palestinians to go to southern Gaza, which may or may not be a refuge at this point. It seems like it's not at this point. They have commenced carpet bombing Gaza. So the casualties on the Palestinian side have been sporadic and merciless. Merciless. The major component, over a third of the casualties from the numbers coming out right now, are children. It's a tragic story on both sides. Hamas has been embedded in Gaza, and it is believed that they are operating in a tunnel network that was developed in anticipation of conflicts with Israel. So it's a lot of people reporting on this, and I thought what I really want to do is to bring some clarity, a perspective, which I think it would allow others to gain insight of the situation to make a more level-headed, pragmatic, and hopefully beneficial decision. And to do this, I want to go back to the Ottoman empires, the 1500s to be exact. As you see Spain ascend through its use of its conquistadors, conquering the new world, finding wealth around the world, and empowering itself in this Habsburg dynasty, you start to see a radical conservative action come from this. Spain, of course, dismisses and abuses other sects. Of those sects were the Jewish sects, that operating in Spain under Moorish rules, primarily called the Sephardic Jews. Now, of course, a lot of these Jews left Spain. Some went to the Americas, some went to the Netherlands. Many found refuge in the Ottoman Empire. A lot of them grew around the port city of Tel Aviv. This part of the Ottoman Empire administered over the local indigenous, I don't want to say indigenous, that's the local Arab population. Of course, the Arab population flourishing is when Islam came into being, and the Muslims of the Arabian Peninsula went on a conquering spree that stretched all the way from Spain to Central Asia. The Jewish community primarily was used as a way of a commercial means and basically driving revenue in this part of the region for the Ottoman Empire. This is very important because it outlines a distinction between the Jewish inhabitants of this area, the Arabic inhabitants of this area, and the Turkish Ottomans of this time, in which whose empire this existed. The Jewish occupation was not an antithetical to Turkish rules. This was more of a partnership. And this goes up into World War One. And why this is important in World War One, at the fragmentation of the Ottoman Empire, is because the British, seeking whatever opportunity they could to gain one up on the Ottomans, they made deals with the Arabs, because around this time nationalism was the flavor, of course. They made deals talking about bringing upon Arab nationalism, a state for the Arab people. And working with the Arabs would resist Ottoman rule. They also work with the Israelis. They received support from the Israelis. And in return, the Israelis, and not Israeli at the time, but Jewish Zionists. A Zionist is a believer that Jewish people should have a state on their own. That's more of a long story short definition, but they made a deal with the Zionists to create a safe state, or create a state, carve out a state for Israel with the Balfour Declaration. So lo and behold, the Ottomans do eventually lose, and their empire has to be sliced and diced. And what results of this is not some ideal scenario between a Jewish state and an Arabic state, but a partition from France and Britain of this Levant or Middle East region. And a lot of states were created from this. This site Picos, named after the British and French diplomatic advisor, which basically partitioned this part of the world. And the southern parts, Jordan, Iraq, Kuwait, went to the British. The northern parts, Syria, Lebanon, went to the French. And at this time, these countries did not exist. They were partitioned from the Ottoman Empire. And then there was this rump left in the Levant, which would eventually come down to be Israel, modern day Israel, West Bank, and Gaza Strip. So let's put that region to the side for now. As we can see that when the British received land, they had to pay their dues. Of course, they put the Hashemites in charge of Jordan and Iraq. Iraq had subsequent uprisings in which they were overthrown, but the Hashemites still rule in Jordan to this day. The British also separated Kuwait, and in the northern parts, the French, they separated a more Christian influence, or not so. It wasn't as the 99.9% Arabic Islamic population of, the 99.9% Islamic population of Syria. They partitioned out the coastal province of Lebanon. So what you have here is you got this partition, and you got this leftover space in the Levant, which will become modern day Israel. Now, Israel, kind of one of the only nations, or one of the first nations built from the outside in, because of their influence and network. Israel grew through mass migrations. And what happened was, because the Israeli, understanding that they wanted their state, in preparation, they set up shop in the Negev Desert. This is very important because you can see to this day that the Negev Desert, it what separates the West Bank from the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza more geographically closely related and under the tutelage or stewardship of Egypt. And West Bank from that point on was under the stewardship or tutelage of Jordan. Now, the Gaza Strip has been the more densely populated one, and then of course West Bank has to deal with their settlements. The reason why this is so important to me is because we're talking about peoples and nations' reasons to exist, but more beyond that, their right to exist. And many people, and this is what I think the conversation go way left, is there was never a concession or recognition on the Palestinian behalf, what we call Palestinians, behalf of Israel's right to exist, even though there were people in this region of that faith. And there were plenty of subsequent wars where Israel was forced to defend itself and did so successfully to its best degree. This is a big deal. the reason why it's a big deal is because it is only further this lack of recognition or appreciation. Because remember, it was no countries here before. So you can't say that Israel stole land because this was all territorial mandates and provinces. Now, is there a certain subgroup that was of different religion, of ethnicity, nationality? Of course you can say, but is that in itself an argument of why these people couldn't exist? There's numerous occasions in this world, such as where land is partitions, Malaysia, Singapore, Pakistan, India, and the list go on and on. So when people say, well, because none of these to me, it represents that the Arab nationalism was never ever fully achieved, right? Because you can say Palestine wasn't a state, you could say 100 years ago Israel was not a state, you could say 100 years ago. I could also say the same thing about Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan. All of these countries basically coming into fruition around the 1940s, 1950s. It was a game of musical chairs, and unfortunately, the Palestinians were left without a chair. And since then, there has been these problems and contentions because the Palestinians want their chair. And they should have their chair, but the question is, how do they get their chair now? Especially with such resentment and with no acknowledgement or appreciation for Israel to exist. Almost a mutually exclusive mindset that one cannot exist with the other. At least this is what has been held a reason for the inability of these two sides to come together over the last 70, 80 years to create a two-state solution. To me, the remaining questions is this. First, how do you really identify a Palestinian? Is the Palestinian identity truly an individual identity, or is it a difference without distinction? What I mean is, you have these countries, to me, this was all the Arab world, what I see, but you have these countries split apart, Jordan, Iraq, and I would propose the same question. How do you define a Jordanian identity? How do you define an Iraqi identity? To me, these are very closely related groups, similar religion, similar nationalities that were partitioned out by colonial powers. Remember, this was the proposition proposed by ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, also known as ISO, Islamic State of Iraq and Lebanon. They were saying Sykes-Picot was bullcrap. That the division of lines between these people were separating one people. That is a very, very interesting conversation if you want to go there. Secondly, one thing that really caught my eye is the role of Iran in this region. Iran really has no place in this region, but it has exercised great influence and has been able to leverage this way. And the reason why I don't think Iran has a place in this region is because Iranians are ruled by Persia. It's a multi-ethnic country, but its roots are Persian. This is an Arab part of the world. Iran is Shiite. This is a Sunni part of the world. So the heart of this region is not to the east, it's to the south. It's in Saudi Arabia, it's in Egypt. But Iran, through its proxies, Arab Shia groups, such as their support for the Alawites, the minority Alawites in Syria, and their support of Hezbollah, the Shia Hezbollah in Lebanon, have eventually led Iran to this area. And one thing that you can see is that Palestinians, it's almost a cottage industry at this point. Who's really there for the benefit of the Palestinian people, as opposed to using the Palestinian people as proxies to derive some benefit, saying, if you give us this, if you give us some money, or you release these sanctions, we'll get the Palestinians to back down. And that's really the big story here is Arab relationship or Islamic relationship with Palestine. How many nations in this region really want to see Palestine do better, have a civil society, as opposed to using Palestine as a leveraging tool for which they can gather other concessions? For instance, the Jordanians have already came out and said, don't expect them or the Egyptians to take in refugees. If these people are so hell-bent or are so sympathetic to their Palestinian brothers, why are they not taking in refugees? So The Iranian role, the relationship between the Arab brothers, and this is very important. This is why groups like the Muslim Brotherhood are watched very closely, and they had to get them out of power real quick in Egypt because America tries to keep Egypt. Remember, I always say Egypt is a linchpin to U.S. policy in the Middle East and to peace in the Middle East for obvious reasons: their demographic health, their closeness to Gaza. Um, this is very important. Egypt's always on the top of one of the financial aid beneficiary lists of the U.S. Iran, I don't know necessarily their role yet. I know what they're saying they want to do, but what they actually want to do is to be contested. When this conflict first started, the first thing the U.S. did was send out battle fleets, and the reason why they did that is because they want to let the region know, let's not let this escalate, because they'll be all in, and they're trying to find some deterrence. This isn't the old Middle East. These Middle Eastern countries can put a hurting on you, and they are developed, and they do have funds, and they're feisty right now because a lot of these countries have been in war for a while and they're very experienced. So seeing this revelation play out. Oh, and lastly, the Turks. The Turks. So I saw President Erdogan of Turkey come out and speak disparagingly upon, I don't want to say disparagingly, but what he comes out as saying is he's leaning towards Palestine. Whereas I think the Azerbaijanis or the Azeris and the Turks, I don't think the relationship with Israel is as strained as they would want you to believe, especially the Azeris, who, after kicking the Armenians out of Nagorno-Karabakh, relied a lot on Israeli weapons. So it's a lot of relationships in this area, a lot of powder keg barrels that are looking to blow up. So that all being said, it's definitely a reason to watch and to see how this unfolds. But I'm sure that, like many of you, we're all in the same consensus. Enough bloodshed have been spared. Enough bloodshed have been shed. And we all want this war to come to an end as timely as possible with a peaceful and mutually agreed upon resolution to ensure future peace. Let me know your thoughts. Please comment below. I like to hear them. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.